stayed there for about 30 years before retiring as an assistant chief. I had the pleasure of serving over many different units to include community outreach, internal affairs, I think you all call it professional accountability here, special operations, district commander, and also, again, not only as an assistant chief over patrol, but also field services bureau. And I currently serve as the chief of police now with the Park Police in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Okay. Earlier this year, Nashville Mayor John Cooper created a policing policy commission composed of 41 diverse Nashville residents. The commission's purpose is to examine law enforcement, to look at ways of improving public safety, and to build public trust. And in doing that, he is, with the finalists, 5 finalists coming for interviews, he's suggested that he thought it would be good for the Police and Public Policy Commission to ask some questions. And so we have you, and glad to have you here today. First question is, what aspects of the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department would you change if you were named chief?
Well, I truly believe that it's every police chief's job to listen to the community. So my priorities coming in would be what the community has already expressed that they want to see as far as change. They talk about things such as not being afraid of the police. They talk about community engagement. They speak about communication taking place within the agency. They talk about diversity within the agency itself. So those would all certainly be priorities, but also sexual harassment and discrimination. Of course, I've read about that. I know that that's a concern in the agency itself. It certainly concerns me that members within the agency and or those who have retired did not feel comfortable going to those in command, if you will. So we want to make sure we change that perception as well. There are several other things I'd like to certainly discuss, and I want to be respectful of time as well.
Okay.
But one of the things I believe that is the real challenge of any modern day police agency is to go back to the original intent of policing, which essentially is that the police are the public and the public is the police. Basically, we were never intended to be two separate entities, as Sir Robert Peel had laid out when he was actually developing the London Metropolitan Police Department, considered one of the very first, obviously, that we know of as far as a modern police agency. There was also something else he spoke about as well. He talked about police efficiency should be measured not only by the absence of crime, but also the minimization, if you will, of police action. Today, we would think of that as arrests. We would think of that as citations and those actions. But I believe what the community is crying out for today is a police department that is really focused on not only procedural justice, but restorative justice. We're human beings. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. And I think the community wants to see us working together to meet the needs of today's challenges that we see.
Okay, let me just ask you this. Could you talk about some of your past experiences with organizational cultural change and strategic planning?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Well, with the county police, and then I'll transition quickly to the park police, I grew up in an agency that was not very diverse when I first joined it. By the time I made captain, which is just one step below assistant chief, I became the first or the second African-American captain in the entire history of the agency, at that time 80 years of age as far as the agency itself. But I did not want to be the only one, so I regularly reached back, helped to inform our hiring practices, our specialty selection practices, and our promotional practices as well, to ensure that they were fair, transparent, and also objective. Some of the outcomes, by the time I left the agency, our training academy had seen 54% of the applicants were either women or people of color, which is a far cry from what we used to see in the past, or what we saw in the past, which was about 12%. Just as importantly, I made it a point when I could to hire and promote those who were considered minorities. I mentored not only LGBT members, African Americans, Latinos, But before I left, the first African-American female captain was promoted, one of my mentees, and also soon to be promoted is one of my mentees, a executive Hispanic, who is expected to be promoted to captain as well. Now, shifting to the Park Police.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I inherited an agency there that had undergone at least 3 Inspector General audits. Within those audits, they spoke about concerns such as a division within the agency itself. They talked about concerns about ethics violations and several other issues as well. Before I left, I not only reorganized the agency itself as far as the command staff, but also promoted the first African-American female captain, which is an assistant chief for us, and also one of Indian descent, the first in the history of the agency itself. In addition to reorganizing the agency for greater efficiency to reach out to our constituents, the public that we serve, we also instituted training specific to leadership, equal opportunity employment, ethics, cultural competency, and so forth. In addition, I met with every single member within the agency to get their buy-in as well. And also, within the last 2 years or so, we've also seen our hiring and diversity increase to include 66% of our recruits over the last 2 years have been either female or minorities. So in wrapping up that particular issue, and out of respect for time, I challenged them to come up with a theme that they felt best represented them, meaning the entire agency at this point. And it was they who came up with the title or theme, Stronger Together. Instead of seeing our differences as something that divides us, it should be something that brings us together to include with the community itself. And in my last performance evaluation, when describing the impact in the agency, my boss shared statements such as transformative positive change, commitment to integrity, transparency, equity, set higher standards for professionalism and accountability, culture of inclusivity, true team player.
Okay, you talked about diversity and inclusion. Why do you, and I guess you feel that it's important, why so? Why so? Inclusion, diversity, inclusion, and maybe you've seen the Nashville numbers. Sworn officers here are currently 73.6% white men, and when you include white women, it's 81%. Why is diversity important to you, inclusion important to you, and how would you change the figures in percentages in Nashville? What would you do?
Well, first of all, inclusion, diversity, and equity are extremely important to any modern-day police agency. Without it, you lose life experiences that can help to inform your policies and your training. You also lose the respect of the community that you're called to serve, especially for those who may feel marginalized within the community, and it increases, obviously, legitimacy within the eyes of the community itself. There are several things that I would change to ensure that we were a more diverse agency. And I would simply go back to things that I've seen already work, that I've already engaged in. First of all, one has to think about the image of an agency. When I went to the Park Police, one of the things we did when we developed our promotional video is we purposely left scenes such as officers shooting guns or handcuffing people or some other type of action photos, if you will, because for some members of the public, that has a visceral response to it, if you will. And or members such as female may think that, hey, I can't climb a 10-foot wall every single day. The fact of the matter is, that's not what we do every day. What we do on a regular basis is we talk with people. We help solve problems. We help to mediate issues. And that's where the intrinsic value of policing comes from. One of the things we have to do to reach out to the minority community is we have to use the personal touch. We can't expect them to come to us simply filling out an application online. Instead, we have to almost be like college recruiters. Go to them, go to their homes, go to the churches, go to recreation centers. And then those who are reaching out to them should look like them also. When people come into police work or a public safety agency, they want to see people who look like them also, who are doing the job as well. As well, also, we have to think about some of the minimum hiring requirements that we currently list. So, for example, things that could potentially be causing us to lose other individuals, such as the high school diploma or GED requirement, which I certainly agree with, but it also here states 3 years of full-time responsible work experience. Well, for some members who come from certain communities, it's hard to get a job at all, let alone keep 3 full years, whereas our Army will send people off to fight for our country, and they don't require those same requirements as well. So we really have to maybe rethink things such as that. And then in addition, we have to think about partnerships as well. One of the things that we did in Montgomery County is we established partnerships with local high schools and local colleges, where we created a leadership in law enforcement program, whereby members who are juniors and seniors within high school can actually go into a curriculum where they get college credits, and after a certain period of time, develop at least an associate's degree and be hired right away by the county police. And that has certainly also helped us and will help us in the future moving forward. So there are many, many things that I'd love to share, but I want to be respectful of your time.
All right.
But I do believe that those are all very, very important, and also looking for referrals from the community itself.
Okay, thank you. What tools do you think are effective in helping to ensure that police officers can communicate with non-English speakers?
Yeah, I think it's, one of the beauties of technology is that it's given us so many more options today. One of the things I certainly believe in is giving every single officer not only an iPad, but also a phone in which they can actually download an app whereby it creates, or an app allows for translations between two individuals. There's certainly many different applications out there that allow for that. You can basically type in the language and literally speak into it, and it becomes a two-way communication tool that helps the officers right away. But just importantly with the iPad, so many times we come into contact with people in crisis, and they're not necessarily always violent, they just simply need professional medical help. And with the iPad, you can actually bring up, whether they call it telepsychology or telepsychiatry, a professional who's trained to assist that individual at that moment. One of the things I also believe in doing as well, for example, with our Latinx community, is creating, within the academy itself, conversational Spanish courses that officers take. So at the very least, they can communicate at the very basic level when speaking to members of such communities as well. So those are some examples.
Okay. Last year, the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department used force 299 times. Of those, 181 suspects were black. What would be your approach to the use of force? And can you talk about experiences that you might have had in helping to reduce the use of force?
Sure. Use of force should be the last resort in any encounter that we are involved in. One of the first things I would do as a chief is attend the academy itself, go to the academy and speak with the staff and assess what we currently do. There's no doubt in my mind, Nashville is a very progressive police agency, and they're probably already teaching on things such as constitutional policing. But I want to make sure we're also teaching on de-escalation. We're also teaching on implicit biases. We're also teaching on alternatives to force itself. One of the things that we also have to do in police work is ask ourselves 3 basic questions every single time. First of all, is it legal? Second of all, even more important, is it necessary? And then third, I believe that we need to begin asking ourselves, if that was my mother, father, brother, or sister, how would I handle this incident? I think those 3 questions will be very paramount, if you will, in helping us to make wise decisions when dealing with folks who may be in crisis, and we're trying to find some alternative to use of force. When it comes to use of force, some of the things that I've done where I was with the county police, by the time I left patrol, which was in 2017, we only use force in arrest situations 2.7% of the time, so less than 3% of the time that we ever have to actually use force. It was through training, some of the ones that I just mentioned. But just importantly, when we actually began to issue tasers on a regular basis within our agency to serve as a less lethal option, we saw upon the initial deployment, if you will, that our numbers for taser incidents were going up. So we brought the training back in for, or the curriculum for training back in for re-examination, and we felt that there were some gaps. So we not only addressed the gaps in training, but also in the device itself. And from 2013 until 2017, we actually saw our taser usage decrease by 72%. Within the Park Police, I've implemented many of the exact same things we've already talked about, but we've also included things such as cultural competency courses as well, but also courses that deal with members who have intellectual disabilities as well, such as those who may be autistic and or people who are suffering from mental illness. So we've made it a point. Every single member within our agency is expected to go through crisis intervention training, which deals with those who have mental health issues, and other such training, so that they're better informed and understand what their options may be.
Okay. 2 years ago, Nashville voters created one of the strongest community oversight boards in the country. What would be your approach as chief, given the existence of the Nashville Community Oversight Board and the Police and Policy Commission and NOAA? What would be your approach? Would you not want to deal with those entities?
Actually, I believe in this time of police legitimacy and challenges, especially with minority communities or communities that feel marginalized. That could be also LGBT members and others as well. I think it's important that police agencies regularly work with outside entities, if you will. I think there's at least 3 benefits. It enhances the community's trust in our internal processes. It serves to improve legitimacy within the eyes of the public itself. And also, one of the things when I've looked at those who are part of the boards, not only the board, but also the commission itself, there are a tremendous number of knowledge, skills, and abilities within the individuals who comprise those respective entities. And I think they can only help to inform our policies and procedures to help to make us a better agency. I do understand that there's been a new MOU that's been developed with the board as it relates to police investigations, which I think is very important, because I know that there were some outstanding questions about access to records and access to crime scenes and those types of things. So I am very confident that we can work well together. I've worked well with other outside entities in the past. When I was a part of the accounting police, I oversaw the Internal Affairs Division, again, you all call it Office of Professional Accountability, in which I worked with the Department of Justice in an agreement for the last 3 years of a 5-year agreement. And it essentially entailed ensuring that our internal affairs process was more efficient, more responsive to the community, less intimidating to the community, and also transparent as well. So we certainly saw success with that. And I've also worked with the Inspector General within the Park Police. So I am not, working with other entities is not a foreign thing to me. And I think when you look at it from a positive standpoint, it can be a benefit to everybody.
Okay. So can you add to that, how would you build relationships, sustainable relationships, partnerships with those communities that have little trust in the police department, Black communities, Latinx? Can you talk about that? What would you do?
Well, quite frankly, I've been doing it all my life. They're not only with youth, but also with adults as well. With youth, I've been in programs such as, I started out Police Activities League, some call it Police Athletic League. We purposely call it the Police Activities League.
Why?
Because we didn't want it to be just about athletics. We wanted to also talk about things such as life skills and going to college and the importance of education, conflict resolution, so forth and so on. And had tremendous success until the budget crunch came many, many years ago. I've also started, even as a young patrol officer, a summer basketball league in one of our more crime-challenged communities, if you will, so that youth would see the police in a very positive way, especially youth of color. And even today, some of them are still in touch with me. One actually still cuts my hair. He owns his own barbershop today, so that's what it's all about. But also I've been very much involved in restorative justice programs involving youth, whether it's truancy prevention, whether it's addiction services. I've worked with what we call the STEER program within our agency. It's a pre-booking process whereby one doesn't go into the criminal justice system, instead gets diverted for the appropriate help and assistance that they need. This as well, I've worked with entities such as the NAACP, ACLU, Anti-Defamation League, and many, many others. Now, when it comes to outreach to those respective communities, it's so very important, one, that we go to them and understand that they have a place at the table as well within their police department. The police department belongs to everybody. One of the things I've always participated in, probably for the last 15 years, is a monthly Chiefs Liaison meeting with members from the African American community and also members from the Latino community, two separate meetings in which we talk about what's important to them. And those discussions have been tremendously helpful in helping us to inform our policies and procedures, but also staying in touch in both times of crisis, but also time of peace, so that genuine relationships are built and they're not simply due to some type of crisis that exists.
Okay. Chief Darryl McSwain, thank you very, very much, and good luck to you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Appreciate it.
Good.